And welcome. I'll say that again. Hi, everyone, and welcome. And if you're not with us live, welcome as you're watching this at home. I just want to make sure everyone has either a bottle or a cup near to hand and their instrument as well, just so that you've got tools around you that you can be using as we go through things. All right, let's get started. So the 5 main causes of tension, discomfort, and injury. So welcome to this hot topic. As always, with these 1-hour sessions, it's a small dip into a much larger topic. And what we're going to do today is to identify the 5 main causes of tension, discomfort, and injury, to look at some of their most common appearances in our playing, and also to look at their solutions. So tension, discomfort, and injury are absolutely not inevitable or necessary when playing our instruments. Expressing the music with all the passion, commitment, speed, and power that we want is not equal with feeling tension, discomfort, or pain. And these negatives often have a confusing existence in our history and culture of somehow being sort of medals of honor or markers of us being a greater or lesser talent, which is all highly confusing to our physical relationship with our instruments. But playing can feel physically really good. And because our brains and bodies are designed with these highly sophisticated patterns of movement, which we virtuosically use in daily life, and those same patterns can be used to play, meeting all the demands of precision and expression that we want. What often happens when we feel tension, let's just look at this for a moment, is that we swing totally in the opposite direction to relaxation, often felt as being floppy. But just as we know instinctively that we can't play from tension, relaxation is equally unhelpful because we're not organized for movement. When you pick up a cup, your wrist isn't relaxed, or you'd actually drop the cup. Neither is it tense, or you would be squeezing it. It's simply connected to the whole finger, hand, and forearm system. And therefore, it serves its role within that connected system. That wrist is doing its proportionate share of the work, no more, no less. And this is where Goldilocks is so helpful. Too hot, too cold, just right. Or we might say too tense, too relaxed, connected. So when we look at the solutions to these 5 causes, we're really identifying that Goldilocks experience, knowing and feeling what each part does within the entire playing mechanism. One final thing before we get into things, while identifying these 5 causes is essential and provides us with really important knowledge, we can't play from a negative. Even if we correctly identify one of these elements in our playing, such as twisting the wrist, if we try playing by not twisting the wrist, we'll probably actually twist the wrist or just be frozen in place doing sort of intellectual gymnastics because we're trying so hard not to twist the wrist. So solving tension, discomfort, and injury comes from understanding what role each part plays in itself, then how all these parts interact, and finally, how our brains process all of this as one idea and one movement. It's just like a car. There are all those parts under the hood of the car, and they each have to work beautifully in themselves. They then have to be connected together. And finally, we have one thing that actually drives them all. We turn the key to drive the car, and they all kick into action. We don't really drive the car from the fan belt. So this last piece of understanding how we process movement as one idea, one experience, is essential if we're to be free to use these movements to play music. So time for cups and bottles. Grab what you've got. It doesn't matter which hand you use, but I would say if you are in any pain, I would suggest using the opposite hand to do this. So you can rest the cup on a bottle. Hope you can see me. Just have it in front of you, either is fine. And just close your eyes for a second and notice how the fingers, hand, and arm feel. So let's see what happens if we make some gentle changes. If you pull the tips of the fingers in like this, what do you feel? Just take a second to really observe that. Just return to normal. And now if you pull just one finger in, what do you feel? And then back to normal. If you kink out the thumb into a thumb curl, what do you feel? So we feel tension just radiate through the hand and the forearm. And we can actually also feel that radiate up into the shoulder. So this is the first of our 5 main causes, curling. And curling refers to the last joint of the finger, we often call it the nail joint, pulling inwards, creating tension throughout that finger, hand, and forearm unit. We can curl one finger or many fingers, and the thumb also. The thumb develops an outward kink when we do this. Sometimes we can recognize curling as the sort of pinching feeling, the pinch mechanism. So the question is, why do we curl the fingers? And what are we trying to achieve? And how can we replace the curling with a normal movement? So if we take a good, honest view of our hands, it's very clear that the fingers have a long, short design. And that is actually part of what enables us to use them as separate fingers to touch things. But the most common cause of curling in the left hand comes from trying to make our fingers form a straight line to match that straight string. So let's do this together. Let the hand just be its normal long, short design, and then curl the fingers into a straight line. Can you feel that difference? You can always sort of go back and forth between the two, creating a contrast. It's very clear that we need an alternative solution. So grab that bottle again. Okay, if you have the bottle in one hand, you can use the other hand just gently to touch a spot. And then go to another spot. And your forearm understands that it has the job of getting the finger to the necessary spot. The finger just stayed in its 5-finger team, and when it's taken to its place, it gets to touch. Therefore, it's the forearm's job to move that finger, hand, and forearm where they want to go, however tiny. When we understand this, we can actually start to move our brains into the forearm. And a mirror is super helpful for this because we can start to see those tiny movements in the forearm and start to play with greater ease. We do have a language and a pedagogy to teach the exact movements needed to enable our fingers to get to their notes with ease and at high speed. But the fundamental piece for this is this general understanding that through the tiny, tiny movements in the forearm, each finger can be in its optimum place to play with ease and without the necessity to curl. So grab an instrument, you don't need a bow, and let's look at helpful ways to explore this. So we can do this incredibly simply. Just lie the fingers on the strings in their normal long, short design. And you can touch your forearm. If you're a cellist, you're very lucky. Cellists, bassists, guitarists, you guys can look at your arms. Or we can use a mirror, or we can use a little camera. But we can start to feel and see the role of the forearm in navigating the notes that we want. So if I want an F sharp here, I'm going to move this to that place. If I wanted a B here, my forearm would get me there. If I wanted an A over here, my forearm would get me here. So we can explore this unlimitedly, and we call it walking hand in arm. It's one of the fundamental principles of our left arm and enables us to get from place to place. And so we can teach the forearm the geography or the choreography of any passage using this. So we can spend as much time as we want, either in a general way, exploring what these movements are, or we can get very, very specific and we can take a passage and we can look at the specific choreography of that passage. So this is what we call curling and its solution. It's important to say that, with these 5 main causes, except for curling, which is obviously our fingers, all these other causes that we're going to look at today can exist in either arm and in either hand, but also in other parts of the body. But we're going to look at them in the most common way that they appear. And it appears that in this classroom, the lights are on a timer. So I'll hand over to Nora and I'll turn my lights back on. Over to you, Nora.
You just jump up and down. No, they're not motion sensor. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you. I'm Nora, for any of you who don't know me. I am in New York City, and hopefully you won't hear any evidence of that today because I do have my windows closed. And I am going to be following on from Sophie's introduction with actually two more of the main causes of pain and injury, tension, discomfort, and injury. And they're two that often go together, and they are stretching and isolating. So just as we did with curling, we're going to start by seeing if we can just get a general sense of how this feels in the body. So grab your cup or bottle once again, and we'll just pass it back and forth between our two hands a bit. Nothing special. And as Sophie likes to point out, we're actually probably quite good at this, despite the fact that we never had a lesson. So it's helpful to just notice how much inherent skill and physical logic we all possess that we can then harness for use at our instruments. So at some point we can just pause and just take a look at the hand that's holding the bottle. And what you'll probably notice is that you've got your 5-finger team with a forearm aligned behind, and that the fingers will have arranged themselves spontaneously with a certain amount of space between them. And that spacing is largely determined by two things. So, of course, it's determined by the amount of space in between the base knuckles of your hand, which, of course, is unique to each of us. And it's also partly determined by the size of the object that we are holding. So, if you're holding a regular old water bottle or cup, then chances are your fingers are spaced rather similarly to how they are when you're not holding anything. If, however, you are from the United States and you are holding a mega super duper big gulp cup from 7-Eleven, let's say, or big Tupperware of rice, what you will notice is that your fingers may be spaced further apart to get around the object. But what's really interesting, actually, is that even though the fingers have arranged themselves with more distance, they aren't stretching. It does not feel like a stretch. The hand has simply opened as a whole to a larger degree in order to get around this larger object. And it's so easy that we don't even think about it. In a sense, the object actually opens the hand for us. It tells the hand how to open in a way that does not feel like a stretch. Great. So if this isn't stretching, if this is just opening the hand, then what is stretching? So find your comfortable bottle hold again. And once you've got that, that feels pretty good, try taking your pinky and stretching it out to the side like this without moving the other fingers. Yeah. You can go back to normal and then stretch it out again. And you'll probably also notice that as it stretches out to the side, it also instinctively stretches forwards into this sort of thrust experience. And we can notice how this feels. And as Sophie was, guiding us through what it feels like to be curled, have our fingers curled versus normal, I was just feeling that, if we're not used to tuning into these physical sensations, they can feel subtle at first. But if you think about the way it would feel to have a tiny, tiny stone in your shoe, that's like at first you don't even notice it. But then if you had to take like a 10-mile hike with that tiny stone in your shoe, you would really, really be in pain by the time you were done. So I think with this one in particular, though, we can really feel that stretching the pinky out like this creates a huge amount of tension in the hand itself. You can feel all of those muscles having to stretch and activate. That tension radiates all the way up the arm and also into the shoulder. So this is stretching. And in addition to feeling that strain in the hand and in the arm, we can also feel how weak the pinky is in this state. So and that actually leads us to the third cause of tension, discomfort, and injury, which is isolation. So when we stretch the pinky out like this, we're effectively cutting it off from the support of the forearm and the rest of the hand behind it. And if you try tapping it up and down while it's in that state, you'll feel that while it has a decent range of independent movement in this state, much more so than, say, the ring finger, it is by its nature very weak. And no amount of finger strengthening exercises or do-ness or whatever we've sort of been schooled in is going to change the fact that the pinky in isolation is a weak finger, which is why it needs the support of the forearm in order to be able to operate with the same amount of power and capacity as the other fingers. So you've probably intuited where I'm going with this, but this logic of stretching and isolation is exactly how most of us, or many of us, have been trained to use the left hand. So in leaving the fingers down on the strings, like this, so sort of adding fingers as we go, that sort of logic, or aligning the fingers to a straight string, as Sophie was speaking about before. In leaving these fingers down on the strings, we've made it impossible for the pinky to do anything besides stretch and isolate in order to get to the string, which obviously is particularly pronounced the larger the instrument you play or the smaller the hands you have. And actually, the experience of stretching can even go beyond the finger itself. So those of us who are hypermobile, especially, or have lax connective tissue, can develop a habit of actually thrusting forward. I had this for a very long time, from deeper in the palm of the hand, kind of like this, which creates a lot of structural instability in this part of the hand behind the third and fourth fingers. And then that really wreaks havoc on these third and fourth fingers because they don't have a solid source of support in the palm behind them. All right, so what's the solution? So obviously today is about problems, but it's also about solutions. So as Sophie mentioned in her portion on curling, in order to honor the inherent long-short design of the fingers, you need to employ the tool that we call walking hand and arm, whereby we are letting go of each finger and allowing the forearm to move in order to give the next finger the best possible experience on the string without any need for curling or stretching. And it does seem kind of clunky at first. It is clunky, but then this walking hand and arm is streamlined with other tools such as forearm rotation and left arm shaping, such that in the end, our final experience really feels like we're basically just running on the strings with legs of different lengths. And each one of those fingers is getting the proper support of the forearm behind it. So, sorry about the car alarm. We'll see if Zoom's background noise cancels. Oh, it stopped. Okay, so walking hand and arm, by asking the forearm in order to move, in order to get fingers of different lengths to the strings one at a time, solves the issues of curling and stretching. So that's already a pretty great track record, actually. But it also solves the problem of isolation in the left hand fingers. So in her introduction, Sophie pointed out that this inherent inequality in the hand of our fingers having different lengths means that asking them to align themselves along a straight string is problematic. There's another inherent inequality in the hand besides the unequal lengths of the fingers, and that is the inherent lift drop capacity of each one of these individual fingers. So if we test them out, we'll feel that 1 is great, 2 is pretty good, but not as good, 3 is absolutely terrible, and 4 is a little bit better, but in terms of its range of motion, but is inherently weak. And actually, for many of us who haven't trained ourselves to make 4 independent, it actually is inherently not all that independent from the third finger. So the good news is that walking hand and arm solves this aspect of the unequal engineering of the hand as well. So if you just touch some random spots on your opposite arm, let me do this together, just like this. Yeah. What you'll immediately feel is that each finger that touches does so with the full support of the forearm behind it. So in a sense, you're touching your opposite arm with just the end bit of the entire finger, hand, and forearm unit. And so this participation of the forearm supporting each finger enables us to touch quite deeply if we want to, with very little effort, and it gives us exquisite control over the depth and timing of our touch. So we could touch the hairs on our arm, we could touch the skin on our arm, we could touch the muscle in our arm, or we could even touch the bone underneath, And that's all the forearm delivering us different degrees of power through this aligned finger, hand, and forearm unit. So if you want to contrast this experience with an isolated lift and drop experience, you can freeze your forearm in space and then just tap your finger up and down. So you feel how much less power and control there actually is in this experience versus this, and how much the muscles and tendons of the forearm are actually having to work in order to create this. So now we can go back to the happy experience with the forearm behind each finger.
Oh, you're in. Okay.
And now we can try this on the instrument as well. So we'll do what we did before, only now as you move and you feel that forearm taking us from spot to spot according to the length of each finger so that nobody ends up curled or stretched. Can you also feel the support of the forearm behind each finger as it sort of tests that string the same way you are you can actually also do this. This is kind of interesting. You can try it with your right hand as well on sort of the inside part of your forearm like this and feel those both at the same time and try and create a similar experience. All right. So this is really our walking hand and arm. And just with that one tool, we've solved curling, stretching, and isolation all in one go. So now I'm going to pass it over to Rachel to speak about breaking a fulcrum.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Nora. Little did we know when we went to conservatory that we were going to be doing bottle 101 technique. But here we are with our bottles. They're very, very handy things. So I'm going to have a little session about, which brings us to the fourth of our 5 main causes of tension, discomfort, and injury, and that is breaking a fulcrum. It might be helpful to just define those terms. When we say fulcrum, what I mean is we're referring to the joints, as in the knuckles, the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder, etc. And when I say breaking, it might be helpful to think of what that actually means, as in we're moving that joint out of its median range of motion. So if we refer back to what Sophie was saying about the Goldilocks thing, we could say, okay, this is too much, and then there's a sort of in-between range of motion. And we do get into lots of trouble when we exit that median range of motion, especially as we do it repetitively. And a very common appearance, this is a very, very common appearance in string playing of this particular cause of tension and discomfort and injury. Which often leads to a lot of pain and discomfort, which is breaking the wrist fulcrum at the extremes of the bow. So at the tip and at the heel of the bow, and of course, cellists as well. So again, it's always really helpful, I think, to think, why on earth do we, actually learn to do that? A lot of us are taught to do that movement, so we'll get to the tip and we'll completely break the wrist downwards at the tip of the bow.
Could you do that one more time so we could really see that, Rachel? It'd be really helpful. Thank you. That's great.
Okay, so I imagine I've got my bottle here and I'm going to move away from the body, and you'll see on the side that I'm going to drop the wrist sort of way below its comfortable range of motion at the tip. And then when we move back to the heel of the bow, often we're taught this sort of thing, which is breaking the wrist upwards. So there are really concrete reasons why we do that. Obviously, when we get our arm away from the torso at the tip, we want to feel more power because the bow is inherently weaker at the tip, isn't it? But we're also hyperextending our arm away from the support of the torso, which we'll find out in a moment. So we want to maintain this contact with the string as much as we can so that we can keep that contact and feel powerful at the tip. We tend to do this dropping down of the wrist, which comes with all sorts of other awful baggage like turning the arm and pressing the shoulder into the string so that we can feel that contact with the string. But actually, once we feel what it's like to not have that, it feels really nasty. And why do we break the wrist at this end of the bow? Because we literally run out of space to move comfortably, to maintain a feeling of flexibility at the heel. So we're also trying to remove this feeling of heaviness, as before at the tip we're trying to like increase the amount of heaviness by breaking the wrist. Here we're trying to decrease the amount of heaviness, because that sort of friction equation at the heel, there's a lot of it going on, and we're trying to often remove it by sort of sucking the weight out of the bow, lifting here, but we run out of space to move freely. So we break it upwards. So, but actually we can get all of that, all of the stuff that we do want, without doing the nasty stuff, which is going to hurt and feel nasty. So we can start with a really simple exercise, which those of you who have been along before may have done a few times, but I've always found it really, really helpful. Even in my practice, I do this sometimes just to go back to finding that basic feeling. So if you're a cellist and you want to sit, if you're not a cellist but you want to sit, then feel free. But if you want to stand, it's also good. You might feel a sort of freedom if you want to stand a little easier. And if you swing your arms, both arms, by your sides, forward and back, and give it some really nice momentum. You can close your eyes if you want to feel it. You want to hone in on that feeling of how it feels. Let's swing back and forward. If you want to, and you feel comfortable, you can hold a small object in your arms. You can start to like combine the feeling of holding something as well as moving. So we notice that we're moving over our feet, right? Or if you're sitting, over the sit bones, we're moving over, our whole movement is calibrated over the fulcrum of the feet. If you shut your eyes, really feel how the entire torso responds to that movement of the arms. Really nice, balanced sort of a feeling. So what I'd like to know now is if you take out that response. So if we make our torso rigid and we make our feet sort of stuck to the floor, and then you try and swing your arms. Give that a try. And maybe you could yell out some words. I was making my husband and my niece do this late last night, and they were just yelling out stuff. It was really helpful. Can anyone come up with some words of how that feels and what it does to the movement? Restrictive. Yeah, absolutely. So we can't actually move our arms as far. It feels awful. What else? Anyone?
Sandra said robotic.
Robotic, yeah. These are all the perfect words that I was going to put in. It feels robotic. Absolutely.
Unnatural.
Unnatural. I find it feels really unbalanced. You feel like you're going to tip over or something, right? And you'll probably notice, yeah, tight, exactly. So those are all the words. Yep, tight in the shoulder, exactly. So lots of other areas in the body want to take over to try and make that movement work. It's pretty nasty, but it's really interesting, isn't it, to see how much movement is restricted by disabling the responsive movement in the torso and the movement over the feet. So we realize that we're calibrating every movement our arms make. Yes, powerless, absolutely. Over the fulcrum of the feet or the sit bones, so that they get the support they need. This unit gets the support that it needs from the torso, and we remain balanced. So maybe we can go back to the good feeling now. I hate ending with the yucky feeling. We just close your eyes, swing the arms again. It's like you've got a sort of energy going all the way to the soles of your feet, isn't it? And into the floor even. So maybe we can take, when you've found that good feeling again, we can take an object. Well, you've probably all got your bottle still. Let's grab a bottle, or you can even use a phone. And let's slide it across a surface. You might have a table in front of you. You can even, let's see, no, something. I've got this thing here. Some of you may have a seat pad or a book or the table in front of you, whatever you find. And if we can just move that across the surface, just gently. Let's just move it around. You can move it wherever you like. Move it over here. And try and tap into that feeling that you just found a moment ago of calibrating that movement over the fulcrum of your feet or sit bones. You can shut your eyes if you want. So you'll notice as the arm goes away from the body, like this, can you all see? The body follows in the same direction as the arm. So as my arm's moving away, my torso is trying to stay behind it, but it's still linked to the floor. So the whole unit sort of goes along with the arm. If you want, you can do the yucky thing and try and move it again on the surface without that response, and you'll notice immediately how horrendous it is. It's a tiny movement, but it's absolutely essential. So let's go back to the good one. Okay. So especially as the arm moves away, we really need to not feel disconnected from the torso. Okay, so as we come back in towards the body, this one is a really interesting one, I find, is that the body moves out of the way of the arm. So again, it's moving in the same direction that the arm is moving.
Yeah. I'm listening to something.
And you'll find that it's the torso is literally giving your arm space to move comfortably inwards. And you'll feel like you're sort of centered towards the back of the body rather than the back of your feet or your sit bones. So then we can notice a really important piece of information, that this buoyancy and resilience that we have in the finger, hand, wrist and forearm, when everything's feeling good, it feels sort of springy, responsive, adjustable, etc. We don't actually have to manufacture them, because we don't have to manufacture that flexibility because it's there already. So it's there all the time. So this is just the calibration over the fulcrum of the feet, enabling all the other parts to function normally. Okay, should we take it to the bow and give it a go? It's a nice poem. Maybe you can grab your instrument, not just your bow, actually. And of course, cellists can try in a cello situation. But let's try and just close your eyes for a second. Remember that feeling of how it felt, really connected and balanced. Put the instrument up and we'll start with the bow down by your side. And let's just swing the arm as you were swinging the arms before. You can be sort of carefree because we're not, playing a Bach solo sonata or anything right now. But let's just swing up and plop it onto, let's say, the E string or the A string. And feel how much, like even getting to that point, how much we've got a response from the torso over the feet. We have. That's a really nice one, because sometimes we think the thing starts from when we play the first note and we're already in the wrong place. Do you know what I mean? So we find this swing to the heel and just sit there and feel the balance over the feet. What does it feel like there? You see there's plenty of space to move here. Now let's feel ourselves plop down there and let's just swing the arm to the tip, really, really activating ourselves over the fulcrum of the feet, and then stop at the point. Has anyone got any words of what it feels like to remain, to find that balance at the tip and the heel? Is it surprising in any way? I always think it's quite surprising to feel how to the left I feel when I'm here, and how forward I am. Even though it's tiny, it makes a massive difference. Nice. So let's feel how we're balanced. We are at the extremities of the bow. So it can, yeah, it's subtle, exactly. But it's monstrously unsubtle if you don't have it. Exactly. Yeah. So obviously we, as Sophie and Nora said earlier, there's a lot more information that we can build into that to make it feel more refined. Because obviously we're like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like there. I know what that feels like there. But we have much more information to add to this to enable us to play with all the colors and articulation, etc. that we want. But this is a really, really central and vital piece that we need in order to build all that other stuff on top of. So I'm going to hand over to Sally, who's going to delve into number 5.
Hello, everybody. So just to recap, we've talked about curling, we've talked about stretching, we've talked about isolating, and Rachel has just talked to us about breaking fulcrums. Rachel talked about the fulcrum breaking at the wrist, but also this can happen when we allow our fulcrums to collapse in our fingers and at all the various joints around our body. We really do have to keep everything connected and aligned at all time. So my job is, of course, to begin on the cup and to talk about this 5th element of the presentation today. And we are going to begin with our cup in our left arms like this, or in our left hand. And as you've heard many times today, we have all got this amazing unit, the finger, hand, forearm unit, which lines up beautifully behind all objects that we pick up. What can sometimes, what we can experiment with now is what happens if one of these fulcrums ends up twisting. And if we end up twisting the wrist in this direction, I think we'll all agree that suddenly we're thinking, that feels more foreign, that feels less nice than when we're beautifully aligned. And we end up stretching this aspect of the wrist here, and then this bit of the wrist here and all the stuff that's inside there becomes a bit crushed or crunched. So if we come back into our alignment like this, we can also find that this twist can occur in the other direction. And this is where we are then shrinking the amount of space available for all that's in here. And this bit gets stretched on this side. So a twist, I think we can all feel, maybe you'll nod in affirmation, feels less nice than the aligned version, which we all seem to find very, very naturally. And this twist can occur when we're trying to find various notes, various chords, all sorts of things on our instruments. Other twists also occur throughout the string playing technique. We can find that we can have a big twist that goes in this direction. Lots of us employ that maybe to get to the G string. That is a twist, I think, when we employ it like that, just in the air, that we can suddenly think, actually, that doesn't feel so nice. And we can also have bigger twists where we have twists of the body, or a twist to reach our shoulder, our instrument. Our shoulder can twist in this direction. So there are many twists that exist, as there are many ways in which we can curl. Well, there are less many ways in which we can curl, because that's just with our fingers, but we can stretch in other ways, we can isolate in other ways, and we can break fulcrums in other ways. But today we are just focusing in on one small area so that we can give you a solution-based approach to the twist that we are going to work with today, which is the twist in the wrist. I might hear some people think, but our hand can go in those places and our arm can do those things. And therefore, what happens if we just practice those movements? We become used to them. Isn't that okay? And I think that this is the moment where I'd like to take a little bit of time to say that we do have to constantly listen to whether our bodies like something or not. Our bodies hold the answer to whether a movement is part of a healthy string playing technique or not. And our bodies have an amazing way of alerting us to something that doesn't feel good. And this alert, this is the tension. The alert is the discomfort. And then hopefully this doesn't happen too often, but that can then end in the injury. We have these amazing systems that we employ all day, every day, that stop us from getting injured and tells us if we are moving in the most efficient way according to how we are designed. And Nora slightly stole my example earlier when she talked about a stone in your shoe. If we go on a long walk, we've got a stone in our shoe. What do we do about it? We take it out because we listened to our body that was objecting to the presence of that stone. We came up with a solution to make the discomfort go away. If we didn't listen to what our bodies were telling us, we might change the way we walk. That would cause tension problems. And if we don't then remove that stone, we could end up with a blister or something similar, which is small, but that is an injury. So when we play, we do have to listen to our bodies. If they are telling us that something isn't right, we need to listen, we need to investigate, and we need to find solutions until it does feel good. And we need to do the same with our students. If our students come to us saying that something doesn't feel good, we really do need to investigate with them. I think there can be a little bit of a history in our string playing history that says, just keep practicing it and your body will become used to it. When we do this, we turn off our amazing inbuilt system of physical awareness. And it's this system that protects us from tension. It's this system that protects us from discomfort, from fatigue, and from injury. So we've got this brilliant system and we just have to listen to it. And I know myself, through years of being a student, I definitely didn't listen to my body in the way that I listen to my body now. And sometimes you think, another niggle, how am I going to deal with this? But it's important to listen and it's important to work with a solution to try and make that go away. So back to twisting. The first thing we need to look at to avoid this twisting that can happen in the left arm is exactly how do we get our arm to the instrument. And we're going to touch on topics that we've already heard today, but let's swing our left arms. And if you're a cellist, you can obviously do this sitting down, but if you are a violin player, it is super useful, or a viola player, to do this standing up. And we can swing our arm and land in the middle of our forehead like this. If I turn from side to side, you can see exactly what I've done. And I have swung my whole forearm unit up to my forehead. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move to touch our left eyebrow. So we're going to pop that arm from the middle of our forehead onto our left eyebrow. And now we're going to move to our right eyebrow. And now we're going to go back to our left eyebrow. And we're going to go back to the right one. And we're going to go back to the left one. And repeating that has allowed me to watch everybody on these screens beautifully move their aligned forearm unit from one eyebrow to the other. So if we did that with the twist movement, let's just all swing our arms up to the middle of our forehead one more time. And without supporting the movement with our forearm, what happens when we just twist the wrist and end up on one eyebrow and twist the wrist and end up on the other eyebrow? And I think that we would all agree that that feels very different, much less strong and much less comfortable, much more easy to fatigue. So that's just proving that we need to take our forearm unit everywhere we go. And if we employ a twist movement, then we're going to end up in a bit of trouble. So how do we get that forearm to really beautifully get to our instrument? And we're going to talk about what sounds like a slightly funny phrase, and that is falling up. So the best way to feel falling up is for us to swing our arm again, and we are going to plop our arm into what we think of as being close to playing position. So for a violin player or a viola player, it might look like this, and for a cello player, it might look like this. And what happens when we swing our arm is we have this amazing plop movement at the end. We have thought about coming up with a different word for this, but plop really is the best thing that we can come up with. So let's do some contrast feelings right now, and let's swing our arm up and stay in up mode. Don't allow that little plop to happen at the end. Just do it a few times and maybe hold it there. And what do you feel is the difference when you don't employ the final plop versus when we do employ that final plop movement? And I think we'll all agree that if we don't employ that final plop movement, the arm feels fatigue, the arm feels tension, and we're really not as free to move and do what we'd like to do. So let's finish, as we always like to do, with the plop movement. Thanks, Anne, for saying that you can feel that tension. Absolutely, the tension is absolutely huge. And when we do this with the plop movement at the end, the arm really feels pretty weightless. It's amazing that the arm that can feel so heavy, when we swing it, we can actually hold it in a way that is weightless if we employ that plop movement. It's a super fun thing to teach young kids. They enjoy swinging and plopping, and it's one of the first things that we really talk about when we begin to look at the till approach, when we come to the till approach for the first time. So unfortunately, falling up and plopping isn't the only thing that we need to complete this picture in order to get our arms to our instruments without employing this twist. What we also need is we need forearm rotation. And rotation, I just want to clarify, is something that happens in this, like this. If you show this movement to a student, especially if they're little, they might say to you that you're twisting your arm. What we call this, actually, this is rotating. And the difference between rotating and twisting is that twisting takes us out of alignment, whereas rotation happens in alignment. So let's see this rotation movement really, really clearly. Let's swing that arm back up to our forehead one more time. And this time, I'd like you to move to your left ear. Great, you're all so good at following. And then over to our right ear, and then back to our left ear, and over to our right ear. And I love using the ears for this because right in front of our very eyes, we can see that rotation taking place, which spins the arm round and allows us to feel really comfortable on both ears. This rotation movement is happening as the result of the radius, which is on the thumb side of the arm, and this radius, which at the elbow joint, is literally spinning around and allowing this movement to take place. And if we just take our right hand, we can easily just pop that underneath the elbow joint, and it allows us to really feel that rotation taking place. And to just follow on from what Rachel has said, it's interesting to do this movement and to really feel us moving over the fulcrum of the feet or the sit bones. And if you want to take out that calibration over the feet, you can feel how different it is and how much you really do want to put in that calibrating over the feet back in so that it feels so nice. Another thing that's super important is that our shoulder is always free to respond. The shoulder absolutely listens to what the forearm is doing and it makes sure that it responds and gets itself into a place that allows this movement to take place really easily and smoothly. So we've got our falling up and we've got our fundamental forearm rotation. And this is what allows us to get to the instrument without our twisting. So pop those two movements together. You've got your falling up with the plop plus that rotation. And we have a recipe that doesn't involve twisting. Cellos and double basses, you have exactly the same movements, but it's just not as visible to see that rotation as it is for us upper string players. So let's grab our instruments and see how it feels to fall up with a plop plus the rotation. And before we do it, I just want you to show you what it looks like if we don't add the rotation. And if you can see, my fingers are in a position which means that they're simply not over the strings. They're not in playing position. They're not in a helpful place for me to be able to play the notes. And it's the rotation part of what I'm talking about, which allows our fingers to actually successfully get to each string, which is why we need both things in this jigsaw puzzle. So you can just experiment with that, and you can see that the falling up plus the rotation gets us beautifully ready to play without any twisting at the wrist. So what happens when we want to actually get from note to note? We've talked a lot today about walking hand and arm, but we can also employ that rotation movement that we practiced on our ears to help us get from note to note. I want us to imagine that our face is an amazing playground, which is just like the fingerboard on our instruments. Let's, for example, take finger number 2, and can we all put finger number 2 on our chins? If you want to put your instrument down to make this easier, that's absolutely fine. So we've got finger number 2 on our chin. Next, we're going to put finger number 1 on our left eyebrow, and we're going to go there in a simple movement like this. Next, we're going to put finger number 3 on our other eyebrow in one single movement. Next, we're going to put finger number 2 on our forehead, finger number 4 on our nose, and we can now improvise. You can make up whatever piece you want to on your face. And what we're all doing is we're moving our aligned finger hand forearm unit around our faces, and we're adding in these micro rotational adjustments, which allow us to stand on each finger in each location with ease. So basically, to avoid twisting to get to all sorts of areas on our fingerboard, we can use our finger hand forearm unit plus rotation, and that allows us to stand square, to stand strong on each note without a twist in sight. And every time I kept coming to thinking about this presentation, I kept hearing the song, "Let's Twist Again," like we did last summer. And so that's now a song that has a very different meaning to me. So we're not going to twist again like we did last summer when it comes to playing our instruments. And that brings us to the end of these 5 causes of tension, discomfort, and injury. As I said earlier, that is just one example of a twist. There are other ways in which twists occur in our playing, as there are other ways of curling appearing in our playing, stretching and isolating, and breaking a fulcrum. But today, we're so sorry we can only give you a Michelin-starred portion of till approach information because these workshops are so small, so short. This brings us on to letting you know about the fact that we do have a huge range of resources. These can be explored on our website. These can be explored on our YouTube channel. And as well as these video resources, we have loads of online events throughout the year. And I would just love to highlight one of our online events, which is way more than an event because it's nearly a year-long thing. And this is our pedagogy certificate, which is fairly new to the till approach. We're just coming to the end of our first year of delivery, where we've had the most amazing cohort of teachers from LA in the USA to Scotland in the UK to Brisbane in Australia. It's an online course which runs from July to May, and as well as diving deep into the till approach information from a teaching perspective, it also allows you to develop your own playing as well as being part of, I hope it's okay for me to say, a dynamic, a warm and a curious till project community. So if you'd like to know more about our pedagogy certificate, there is plenty of information on the website, and our deadline for signing up is the 1st of June. I'm now going to hand over to Sophie, who is going to talk to us all about our summer symposium.
Thanks, Sally. Just to wrap up, so you could be leaving this session thinking from the negative, but actually what we're really hoping is that once you've understood these 5 main causes, this approach, this whole approach and all this wonderful information is about playing from the positive. And it's really about the specifics of the playing. So these 5 main causes are really just the beginning, and then they are the introduction to this wonderful body of knowledge that means we don't need any of these things at all. And the playing really can feel amazing. So I just want to share a little bit about Summer Symposium. It's coming up July 14th through the 19th. You can do it online or in person. We've actually tried to make the schedule a little bit more appealing to those people in Australia. And just to highlight a few things that go with the Summer Symposium, there are 3 levels of core principles. So if someone's completely new to the information, they get a wonderful overview of core principles 1. If you are familiar with the information, you get core principles 2, and there's a little more nitty gritty in there. And then if you are a veteran, you get, and have a lot of experience, you get core principles 3. Then we have special topics, and we have a wonderful array of different things to explore. So we have some orchestral sessions on orchestral literature. We have sessions for advanced pedagogy, intermediate pedagogy. We have problem solving in action, where people submit passages and we use this information to, like, boom, 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 solve things very, very quickly in the playing. And we have some master classes as well. And then we have a short series on forearm rotation, which is like the key to driving the car. And we also have a pedagogy certificate session for those people who are starting that. We have a fantastic community day, which is really fun. We have a completely different timetable for that day, and we have wonderful discussions, panel discussions. And this year, one of those is actually integrating different applications of this information. So if you're coming at it from a teaching perspective or as a performer, what happens when you come to it with an injury, what happens post-injury, and we're really looking at how we use this information from all these different perspectives. And then there is a barn concert, which is just a lot of fun. People come, they bring their own chairs, they bring food, and we play chamber music, and it's really a lovely evening. So all of that's available. Oh, and lessons. Lessons are included, one-on-one lessons are included with that. So you can do that online or in person. Nora, what have I forgotten?
Oh, I think that's quite complete, actually. Yeah, I think we just wanted to emphasize that, especially if you're new to this information, sort of arriving here and taking it all in for an hour is sometimes we struggle with what to do next with this. And so one way to explore further is in something like a symposium, where we're here for a whole week and we can discuss a whole range of topics, ranging from the most sort of elemental things, as we've been discussing today, all the way to how you actually apply this in learning a concerto or working on symphonic literature or something like that. So you can really see the breadth of the information. And the other thing is the lessons, which obviously you can explore the Summer Symposium, or all of us are available for one-on-one lessons, in terms of figuring out how to properly and in the most effective way use this information in the service of your own playing and teaching. We feel lessons are really fundamental to that. So that's our pitch for that. But thank you all so much for joining us. And I think without further ado, we'll start the Q&A.